about more than strength. Welcome to More Than Strength. My name is Dan Flanick, and on today's episode, we're going to talk with the man, not a myth, but definitely a legend, Rodney Miller. Rodney is a type 1 diabetic athlete, and he uses training for strongman competitions as a means to conquer his physical disease of type 1 diabetes. But in this episode, you're going to hear about Rodney's struggles as a child and his discovery of physical training to help make his disease a little bit easier to manage, but also, and even more importantly, that helped him manage the psychological troubles that he's experienced because of this disease and how he's dealt with challenges that he's faced throughout his life. Now, if you're anybody who is going through something hard right now, or knows anybody who's going through something difficult right now, or anybody who has a disease that they're struggling with, then you definitely want to listen to this episode, because there's going to be tons of nuggets and pearls that Rodney tells us about that's really helped him become the person that he is today and learn how to conquer type 1 diabetes. All right, Rodney. So where are you from? Where are you coming to us from today?
I live in a little town called Midland, Texas, and it's kind of what's known as the petroleum capital of the United States.
Is that from the same town from the movie Friday Night Lights?
So that is our sister city, Odessa. But
Okay.
when I say sister city, it's like a 10-minute drive.
Okay, so you're right there.
Oh, yeah.
Did you play football growing up, or?
No, I didn't. I played no sports. I grew up in a very small town in Oklahoma and have since moved here. And we only had baseball and basketball. And when you're 5'4", 5'5" in high school, nobody really wants you on the basketball team. My name wasn't Spud Webb. So that really wasn't good. And then I threw sidearm, and my coach absolutely hated anybody that threw sidearm. So while I had a pretty good glove and played shortstop a little bit in the younger days, I never played any sports in high school.
All right. So I want to dive right into, you're known as, the strongman, you got type 1 diabetes. Tell me about when you found out that you had type 1 diabetes.
So I was actually 4 years old, and so memory-wise, it's a little sketchy. But, presented with the pretty common symptoms with type 1 diabetes was urinating a lot, was extremely thirsty, was sleeping all the time. And my parents took me in, and, a normal blood sugar would be 80 to 120. Mine was 880. And so they actually, I'd been what's called diabetic ketoacidosis. And that's where the body actually starts to shut down because of high lack of insulin, and very high blood sugars actually makes the blood acidic. And so, you can imagine what kind of damage it's doing internally at that point.
Yeah.
And so they pretty much told the doctors, you need to go say your goodbyes. Like, he's just not going to make it. And I ended up falling into a coma for about 2 weeks. And, you have vague recollections of like sounds in the background, but nothing, I don't remember, like speeches and conversations and stuff like that just don't register. But I eventually kind of came out of it, got back, and survived. I always tell people I'm just too stubborn. If I go out, it's going to be on my terms. I'm drop an Atlas stone on my head or something. A pancreas isn't going to get the best of me. So that was pretty much the diagnosis story. So I was 4 years old, and my parents had no idea what they were doing, and we pretty much just had to go from base zero and grow. And we learned the good way and the hard way, but thankfully I had pretty common sense parents, and they were able to do the things that I needed to do to make myself survive.
So after you found out, and as you got older, when you could start remembering life, it's kind of fun. I think about kids as they're just drunk for the first 6 years of their life. They have trouble walking. They don't remember anything. They slur their words all the time. So once you were done being drunk, when you were 6 or 7 years old or whatever, what was life like for you? Because, you're different than just probably most of the kids, if not all of the kids that you went to school with. There's probably very few who had type 1 diabetes. So what was life like for you as maybe a teenager going through high school with type 1 diabetes?
Oh, yeah. I was the only one in the town, and it was a very small town, so it was very easy to ostracize me in the group. It's like, oh, Rodney can't do this, Rodney can't do that because he's diabetes, and the diabetes is going to get him. Nobody really understood. They didn't understand why I had to take my own lunches to school. They didn't understand why I had to have snacks in the middle of class, and just kind of normal stuff like that. So, it was I was separated through ignorance. A lot of times there wasn't malicious intent behind it, but it's just they didn't understand. But I was also very sickly too. Growing up, there were a couple of school years I missed 3 months. I'd get the cold, turn into a flu, turn into pneumonia, because diabetics have remarkably weak immune systems for the most part. And so, then as we got into teenage years, I'm extremely stubborn and extremely high pride, let's just say. And so I started doing things that were completely against what I needed to be doing, just solely for the fact that I was away from my parents and I was away from the strictness, and thought that I was really going to give it to them, And so I'd eat candy bars at school, and then I'd come home, my blood sugar would be 300 or 400, and they couldn't understand why, and they'd get mad, and blah, 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 blah. Pretty typical teenage angst type stuff. And, later what we come to find out is that's kind of a mental thing that comes with diabetes long-term, is what's called diabetes burnout. And it's where you just get tired of having to do the things, so you just stop doing them. And hopefully it's pretty short-term, and you kind of go, okay, well, this is dumb. I'm not going to beat my own body at what it's doing. So I just need to kind of get back in line and find a happy medium on where I can take this. But I was little, man. Freshman year of high school. And what's funny is insulin is a growth hormone, and most people don't realize really what that entails. And so I ran into a guy who would appear to have dwarfism, when in all actuality, his family was so poor they couldn't afford insulin. And so he was on severely limited amounts of insulin his entire life, and it stunted his growth. And we kind of think that that's led into kind of my disproportionate body in relation to my family. My dad's 6 foot, my brother's 6'3", my sister's 6'1", I'm 5'7". Mm-hmm. But from clavicle bone to clavicle bone, I'm 3 inches broader than my brother. It looks really weird. Like
that's all that matters.
Yeah, exactly. Just
there's one other thing, which I'm sure you got to be anyway.
Yeah. So it's very abnormal to see me in a family photo, because I'm very broad. I look like the little cave troll that somebody brought out of the basement and put next to the tall, skinny people. And so there's a lot of factors like that we didn't even really understand were happening, but were. And now in the later years, that's why I'm such a big advocate of not being scared of food, is because you need to be taking the drugs, and you need to be taking the food in, and live a healthy, normal lifestyle.
So we're going to talk about you and how you got into Strongman. But first, I might be poking a little too hard, and if I am, you can tell me to shut up. But when you were in high school, you mentioned that you were ostracized a little bit, like out of ignorance. Were there any circumstances where you were teased because of it?
Oh yeah. I was not only did I have the disease, but I was also the runt. And so a lot of the times it was hard to differentiate whether they were teasing me because I had a disease, or they were teasing me just because I was the smallest one and the easiest target. Oh yeah. I'd gotten more than my fair share of fist fights. And, unfortunately for them, I don't like to be backed into a corner, and I proved to be quite versatile with my knuckles. And we're talking about rural Oklahoma. We're talking about a very small agriculture-based community, and, fist fights were going to happen, about once a month. Somebody got into a disagreement with somebody else, and Joe Bob punched Billy Bob in the face. And, the ag teacher came down and broke it up, and we were all good to go. But I was blessed to be on the more intelligent side of the spectrum. And so even my senior year of high school, I was a full-time college student while I was taking the couple of remaining course classes that I had to at the high school. So it was kind of hard to tease the kid that could give you all the answers to the test.
It's true. So At what point did you start getting into training? Because I know you did powerlifting and strongman both, right?
Yep, yep. And that happened kind of later on in life. Met my wife. We moved to Midland to start a career, and the career involved a lot of driving and a lot of sitting, and out in communities where you're going to go eat at the mom and pop store where everything's fried type deal. And so I gained a little bit of weight. I got up to about 170 pounds, and had a body fat percentage of like 32%. So I was pretty chunky.
Mm-hmm.
And then I decided, I need to do something about this. I need to kind of get in the gym. And I kind of messed around for about a year working with this trainer or that trainer. I'm like, it's not that fun, And then in 2008, my wife came to me and she said, I'm pregnant. And I was like, well, okay, let's pump the brakes here. I had already gotten to a point where I was starting to research some of the long-term effects of diabetes and stuff like that. And it was finally starting to hit home because I'd never been around. I'd never met another diabetic at this point in my life. And so not being around those people, you don't really have any source of information. And the online community wasn't anything like it is now, where everything's at your fingertips. So she came to me and said she was pregnant. And I'm like, man, I got to get my shit together. Like, there's fixing to be a life that expects me to be there to take care of it. And being a very family-oriented person I am, I'm like, I want to walk her down the aisle, mainly to intimidate the guy she's marrying, but I need to be there. And so that's when I really kind of kicked things up a notch and did what I think most guys who get into the gym and start to get serious do. Like, I wanted to be a bodybuilder. I wanted to be the next Arnold.
Did you, by any chance, use the Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding?
Of course I did. Like 2-a-day workouts for 3 hours long each. Man, I was pounding it. And, I got pretty decent size. I got up to about 200 pounds at about 18% body fat. So I definitely done a big recomp, propensity to grow muscle in my shoulders and back was really high. So I had a very nice V-taper. Unfortunately, that was it. It just stopped because my legs resemble those of chickens. So I realized pretty quick that the bodybuilding life wasn't going to be for me because you get on stage and you look like Mr. Strong. You remember him, the triangle guy? So you realize this is not going to work out very well for me. And I happened to go into the gym one night and there was a flyer for a little local charity powerlifting meet. And it was just a push-pull. I said, I love deadlift. I love lifting heavy. Why don't I just do this? And so with about 2 weeks of some really poor peak training, I went and entered the contest. I got second in the deadlift and first in the bench press. And I was kind of hooked. I'm like, man, this is where it's at. This is what I need to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, it kind of took off. I hired a couple of different coaches along the years. I've worked with a guy named Josh Bryant.
Yep.
Who's a pretty big name. I've worked with Mike Tashir.
Mm-hmm.
We really wanted to try his, I forget what his HRV system.
Is it the reactive training? Yeah.
Systems. Yeah.
The RPE scale. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's got the system that where you log in every morning, you put in like your resting heart rate and you do the finger tap test for, see how hard your CNS is firing and this like that. But because the blood sugars could vary so much that it would alter the outcomes of those tests, we just quickly realized Mike was like it's just not going to work for you because you've got a whole nother level of added variables that affects all of this.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he kind of like, I would love to help you, but I really can't because you can't even do the things that I use to track progress with a client. So, and it was really cool. I appreciate him being upfront about that, not just ripping me off for another 6 months and being like, oh, I don't know what happened. I've worked with a couple of pro level strongman when I got into it. And actually my coach now is an international 175 competitor who runs marathons for funsies.
I don't think I've ever heard of anything like that before, but
they're out there. There's a guy, his name's Alex Vieta,
mm-hmm.
and he runs Complete Human Performance. And so Alex is like a 700-pound deadlifter, and then he runs ultras. at 242. Yeah, they took a pro strongman who won his card in the heavyweights down from 330 pounds to, I've seen him get down to 236. He won his lightweight pro card, which is a 231-pound class, and ran a marathon the next day.
What?
Yes. I mean, it's pretty insane what these guys are doing. And they take endurance runners and they or endurance athletes, cyclists and runners, and they're putting them on, static strength lifts, and they're hitting like 400 and 500 pound deadlifts.
Yeah. Well,
and then they're going out and running 10 miles.
Well, it's funny how just getting stronger kind of makes you better at everything.
It does.
It translates over to, there's a perfect example. It translates over to running marathons. So before we finish our conversation with Rodney, we have a quick commercial break brought to you by us, morethanstrength.com. In 2011, I lost someone who was like an older brother to me. And before he passed away, I was given a bracelet by his family members that said, "Help Josh win his fight against leukemia." And since that time, so for the last 5 years, I've never taken that bracelet off. In fact, I'm wearing it right now, and there it is. And the reason is because whenever I'm going through a struggle or a difficult time, I look down at my wrist and I remember Josh, and I get the strength to keep moving forward and keep pushing on. And so I wanted to be able to give this token of strength to other people. So if you think this is a good idea and you think that there's people in your life that could use something like this, where they look down and it reminds them that they can keep going forward and that there's people who believe in them, even if they don't believe in themselves, then go to morethanstrength.com. And it's pretty self-explanatory. You can get a bracelet. You can send it to somebody who is going through a struggle right now and really help make their day, but maybe even help get them through some of the most difficult times in their lives, like this has helped me. So now back to the action with Rodney. So what, like in terms of, physically, we know strongman. I want you to tell us first about what you went from, because when you were telling me before we even started this interview about what you started benching the first time that you went into the gym, or what you started out at, and then what you're at now.
When I walked in the gym the first time, I couldn't bench a quarter on each side of the bar. And that was kind of embarrassing. You walk in, I was like, I've never been in a gym before, but it can't be that bad. And then I go to bench and, guys are like hitting 2 plates beside me, which, back then that was huge to me, like the 2 plate mark. And, they're doing reps and I'm like, yeah, I can do that. And I put a quarter on and it's like, oh, no. And then somebody had to come like pull it off of me. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to have to stow the ego before I walk in here. My best in competition is a 330 bench at I competed in the 220s, but I walked around at like 210, 205. Squats, I've hit 440 in wraps, which I hate squats. I've got like a 375 front squat, so I'm a much better front squatter than a back squatter. And then deadlift, I've pulled in a comp 518, but I've tripled 515.
Okay. So you're somewhere up around between probably like around mid fives somewhere now.
Yeah. Well, I keep getting injured. And so that tends to put a little damper on things. I pulled 600 on an 18-inch deadlift just this past weekend.
That's right. I saw that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So in terms of, like I said, it's amazing to, see the numbers that you've been able to progress yourself toward, but what mentally, because that's what really this whole thing, like we've talked before, that this is about, it's kind of showing, like, I love that you illustrated the fact that you're not like this genetic freak athlete like people think of when they think of strongman or powerlifting or bodybuilding or any type of weightlifting. But so what has this done for you mentally? Like, how has the process of going from not even being able to bench a full set with 25 pounds on each side to being able to bench 330 and squat over 400 pounds and deadlift over 500 pounds, like what has that process done for you mentally?
Man, it's such the confidence build is huge. You go from being incapable of something to, with time and effort, to become capable of something. And that's why I'm such a big fan of powerlifting or strongman or just strength sports in general, Olympic weightlifting, even CrossFit to a point, is because strength training is one of the few things in this world that you are rewarded for the amount of effort that you put into it. Nobody can go in and do the sets for you. Nobody can sit down and eat the meals for you. If you do the things, you are immediately rewarded. And I shouldn't say immediate because it's a very time process, but it's not one of those things like it's a nebulous reward. Like if you do all the right things, you may or may not get a raise at your job. You may or may not get the date with the girl you always wanted to date. But with strength training, it's much more defined and linear. You always have another goal that you can reach if you keep going. But the ability to cope with the disease and what it's done for my health and learning about the disease and learning how to manage the disease and everything has taken all the stress and all the feelings of inadequacy and just done away with it. That's probably the biggest thing I can think of.
So that having diabetes just throughout your life, you just mentioned a feeling of inadequacy. You felt like, what does that mean? Like you weren't enough because of the disease, or?
Oh yeah. I mean, because if you don't take care of the disease, it's almost muscle wasting. And so there are times in my life that when I had poor control or just didn't care enough to control, that I would get down, in the 100 range mark, 110 pound range mark. And with my kind of frame, it looks really sick. I mean, I used to buy smalls from the Buckle, and we really know that that's like a triple small.
Yeah.
But they used to fit and not be tight. So you can kind of give an idea of how small I really was. And, it's the same thing like guys that are really overweight, they feel outcasted and they feel that the attention's on them. Well, when you're on the other side of the spectrum, it's the same thing. I was always small as a male. And so if you're the smallest male in the room, instinctively to some degree, you always think everybody else is judging you. And a lot of times it's true because unfortunately there's a lot of people out there that are jerks.
Yeah.
So, we get caught in, it's body dysmorphia to a point. It's like the bodybuilders that think they're never big enough, so they do more and more and more and more. And on the same side of it, it was, I had a very negative self-image of myself. I didn't think I was capable of doing anything really. I didn't think I was capable of playing sports. I didn't think I was capable. And once you kind of unlock that and realize that your worth is not defined by other people's,
judgments of you.
Yeah, exactly. Perception of you, that you are capable of anything that you really want to do if you put the effort into it. That was a big turning process in my thoughts that took me from being kind of a really negative, dark person to more kind of what you see now, more emotionally stable and upright. I mean, I'll go ahead and share it. So I attempted suicide twice growing up. So, when I say come from a dark place, I mean, there were points in my life that I just didn't want it to continue.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it was because of that. It was, I was very negative. I was very hard on myself. I thought everybody, not hated me, but just had no use for me. And so once I got into lifting weights and everything and realized, wow, I can grow shoulders, I have a big back. Like these are things that I have built and that I have created worth in myself type deal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. Did you hear the podcast last week by any chance? Or this actually on Tuesday?
I meant to watch it. I just haven't had time.
No, that is fine. Very, very similar kind of things that you dealt with the same thing with the guy that I interviewed on the last podcast. Man, that's amazing. I wasn't expecting that to come out.
Well, and I've never talked about that on another podcast, but that fits very well in, nobody's ever really asked me the mental journey that I've taken. Everybody's, they want to know the physical journey, but the mental aspect of it, man, yeah. I mean, like I said, growing up in a small town, in a small school, everybody knew you as the diabetic kid. And so they would exclude you because they were afraid oh, what if he goes into a coma, or what if he, and I passed out at school a couple of times, and stuff like that. So people already knew that, half the people thought I could die at any minute, any moment's notice.
So that's really interesting way, because I see a theme here, because this same thing, like the guy in the interview last week, anyone listening to this, if you're interested in what we're talking about right now, there's also another podcast we recorded called Underneath It All, which you should go back and listen to. You should go back and listen to too.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, you'll really like it. But so far, I've actually worked with several people for some reason just throughout life. I don't know why, but I've been in circumstances where I've had to help people who were on the verge of committing suicide, or people who were in a state where they weren't suicidal to the point where they were ready to do it right now, but they were in, I guess, a contemplation stage of it. And it's just something about the ability to go in and show yourself what you're capable of doing. Would you say that was the thing that really helped take you out of that dark place, just showing yourself, well, hey, instead of look at what I can't do because of this, look what I can do? Is that what you think really took you?
Exactly, and that's the best way I could describe it. It went from I can't to I can. And, that's made huge strides in all aspects of my life, in my relationship with my wife and my now fixing to be 8-year-old daughter, to career-wise, to relationships with my family and all this and that. So it's very much, that's such a big fan of strength sports, even recreationally. You don't have to try to compete to be an elite level lifter. You can compete against yourself. And as long as you see those numbers keep going up, and they will if you do the steps at every meet, a little bit, even if it's 5 pounds every meet, you've bettered yourself.
Exactly.
And that's what it's about, being the best version of yourself that you possibly can.
That is to a T what we're trying to send, what message we're trying to send with More Than Strength, and what you're trying to do with, I want to ask you one more question. I want to get away from the deeper stuff, and I want to ask you about a guilty pleasure of yours. But before we do that, where can people find you? Like, what do you do in terms of, because you're very strong advocate of the type 1 diabetic athlete. Where can people find you?
Facebook, Rodney Miller, Instagram, Strong Like Troll. You can always email me at slbperformance.com. If something you don't really want to broach via the social media, storm that it is. And that's really it. I'm kind of revamping a website because I actually offer online training, where I write templates out, send them to people. Mm-hmm. And mainly I've worked with diabetics for obvious reasons, but I've helped a couple guys set state records in powerlifting here in Texas. So, kind of I'm more versed in that. Usually it's just strength based. I don't feel that I'm qualified to write anybody a pro bodybuilding routine, because that's not what I do. I can't say that I have experience doing that.
But average people looking to get generally strong kind of thing.
Oh yeah, 100%. Even CrossFitters, I have a couple of CrossFit clients that I handle their strength cycles, because their gym may not have a very good strength program in place, or they just don't like it. I've come in and, 2-3 day workouts, not 2 or 3 day per week workouts.
Yeah.
Yeah, really hardcore. Like we're hitting 3 times a day, and then it's a Metcon for like an hour. They're going pro next year.
What's the bolus and barbells? What is that?
Okay, so that's the other thing that I do. So I started bolus and barbells this year, and it is a specific meetup for type 1 diabetics that lift. And that can be your casual gym goer to your competitive powerlifter, strongman, CrossFitter, really anybody that's going to pick up a barbell in an effort to better their control and their health with diabetes. Because what happens, doctors want to push you into endurance-based sports because it's a pretty much N=1 scenario every time. When you do endurance, you're going to see a gradual decline in glucose levels because of the steady rate of energy needed. Whereas when we see, high intensity anaerobic exercise, we're talking over the 80% threshold, especially into the 90+% threshold, we tend to see glucose levels spike mid-workout, which is counterintuitive to what everybody has always been told and what your doctor's telling you, because they also tell you do not take insulin when you exercise. And if you were running, it'd be the worst thing you could do because it's going to suck it out of your bloodstream. And now you're going to have a low blood sugar. You're going to have to stop and eat your glucose tabs and probably not be able to continue because it's going to continually to sap you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas anaerobically, we have found that, well, and I should say that I have found, because not everybody buys into this, but we've seen it replicatable with other people that have tried it, is we see that an intake of glucose, carbs, pre-training, usually pretty simple, like I do Gatorade powder, and I do 20 to 30 grams pre-training, and I'll take the dosage that I need for those amount of carbs plus a unit or two, and then I'll go in and train, and I'll sip on another 15 to 20 grams of Gatorade with some branched chain amino acids, purely for the muscle staving benefits of it, and take another full dose of insulin for that, and I see a completely flat line. And by that, I mean I wear a device that's called a continuous glucose monitor.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes a reading of my blood sugar every 3 minutes and shows me where it is. And so with this, I can graph through a workout that I'm completely flatlined. There's no deviation. And it's because of the carbs providing an energy source that prevents the liver from dumping and glycogen from being sucked out of the muscles so fast that the liver then has to compensate. And we do away with the spike that way. Nobody has ever been taught that by a clinician. Yeah. And if you talk to a doctor about it, most of them absolutely. I had one doctor get up and leave the room. He's like, I can't listen to you tell me this. I feel that it is medically unsound for you to do this, and I'm just not going to listen to you do it. But I've had a PA like sit down and write notes. And she's like, I've got 6 CrossFitters that come see me. I need to know this so that I can tell them, I'm going to like leave a note in their folder that they can mistakenly take so that it's not me giving them medical advice, because this is completely counterintuitive to the medical community.
Yeah.
But it's what works. And so I'm trying to give that sort of knowledge to people and just show them. I mean, when we had our event in Austin, we had 25 type 1 diabetics in the same room, squatting, strict pressing, deadlifting, watching me do stones. And that was the first time in my life I've ever been in a room with more than one other diabetic, ever.
When was that?
Yeah, it was in Austin, and it was June 11th of this year.
So that was the first time.
It was the first time in my 33 years of life. I've never been in a room with more than one diabetic up to that point.
Wow.
And you don't really think about that, but the type 1 diabetes only accounts for 5% of all diabetes cases in the U.S. So you're talking about a very minuscule amount compared to, my cousin's a diabetic, or my aunt's diabetic, or my grandpa's diabetic. Chances are they're type 2, which is a metabolic disease, whereas type 1 is autoimmune disease. Mm-hmm. And so it's vastly different in how it's treated, how it's controlled, and just the day-to-day life of it.
That's amazing. I can't believe that's the first time you've ever been in a room with not even just a lifter, just like someone else who's had type 1 diabetes.
Yep.
Wow. All right.
I mean, it just doesn't really exist. We're so spread out, mm-hmm. and we make up such a small percentage of the population that, I mean, it would be like finding somebody that was your exact same height, your same eye color, your same haircut, facial hair, and dressed the same way almost. Mm-hmm. Black shirt. If somebody looked exactly like you and had a black shirt on in New York, that would be about the same way as finding another type 1.
That's awesome. That must have been a good feeling.
I just stood there like dumbfounded at one moment. I turned around and I looked around the room and everybody was lifting, and I just stopped. It was a very surreal experience. It was a very humbling experience, that something that started off as a random idea about 6 months prior to that could have created this. And everybody, some of the feedback I got was embarrassing because it was so positive, And they got me on the last podcast I did. They actually recorded, people sent in recordings of their thank yous to me, and I'm bawling like a baby, and she's trying to ask me questions, and I'm like, you're gonna have to give me a minute, because it was that emotional for me. It was that when you have the opportunity to affect somebody's life in a positive manner, that's it. You've won. There's no higher thing that you can do in your life than to have a profound positive impact on another human being.
Yeah. Hey, I'm right there with you. I really am. That's you give me the chills. So I want to let's wrap it up there. But I do want to ask you to end on a even higher note. What is Rodney Miller's guilty pleasure?
What is Rodney Miller's guilty pleasure?
Yeah.
I think I have to say it's a new guilty pleasure now. So I had a buddy from Pennsylvania tell me about these Hostess style cakes. It's called Tasty Cakes.
Yep.
So he brought me 4 boxes of Tasty Cakes. The world's worst that you could bring a diabetic. But, I follow about a 90-10 rule. Like, you do what you need to do 90% of the time. 10% of the time, you do what sanity dictates. So, especially after squats and after deadlift training, I'm super sensitive to insulin and super sensitive to, the intake of carbs. So there's less chance for them to be stored. Therefore, there's less chance for a high blood sugar resulting from that. So we have a tradition that me and my wife started called deadlift and cupcakes. So I go into deadlift. I usually come home and have like a Hostess cupcake. Well, now I come home and I have this amazing thing called a Tasty Cake, and I think it's going to change my life. Like, they're that good.
It sounds like it already has. Like, you should see the glow on your face right now.
I was like, I didn't know life could be this good.
You're like telling your kid, you're like, get out of here. Like, this is amazing.
No, get out of here. This is not for your lunch. Get out.
All right, Rod. Hey, I appreciate you coming on here. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
No, I mean, just if anybody's interested in contact with me, please do. I mean, type 1 diabetic or not, I think we all have similar journeys that we may be in the process of, where if others have already kind of crossed the threshold into something different or better for themselves. So, I'm a pretty much open book. This is what I'm here to do, is try to help people in any way that I can.
That's awesome. Thank you, Rodney. Before we go, if you have a story that's like Rodney's, it doesn't have to be type 1 diabetes, anything that demonstrates how you use physical strength to conquer some mental struggles that you've been through, please go to morethanstrength.com and click on the Share Your Story tab and fill out your story. That's what Rodney did. That's how we got – well, we reached out on Facebook first, but he went and did that. And we'd really love to feature you, whether it's on a podcast, just like we're doing here with Rodney, or on a blog, or just give you a shout-out, just because we want to send the message that it's about more than strength, as cliche as that is. But thank you, Rodney, and we're out.
Thanks.